If you have been conscious about your preparation for birth, you may be asking yourself a question of, what the heck do I do with my placenta? There is a growing movement in the United States especially of women who choose to eat their placenta in the postpartum, usually in the form of having someone dehydrate and then encapsulate the dried placenta into little kind of vitamin tablets, or extract the placenta in a tincture of sorts. But if you look around the world, there are so many possibilities of what can be done or what we can do to be with or to honor the placenta as something that we grew during the pregnancy and we also birthed. With my first pregnancy, I was really excited by the idea of the placenta consumption and some of the research that I had done by some of the kind of leading placenta encapsulators and a lot of the traditional Chinese medicine practitioners that work with placenta. It really informed me of this idea that the consumption of the placenta can be extremely supportive for my own hormonal rebalancing, my energy levels, and a number of other factors. It also felt like, all other species of animals or mammals, any other species that grows a placenta does consume it and the afterbirth following the delivery of their babies. And as I was working on my book, Mama Eats First, I kind of went in with the idea of creating a chapter or a section at least to invite others to also experience the consumption of the placenta. And then something really interesting happened along the way. The more research I did and the more data I looked at, the more I came to see that actually, although other mammals consume their placenta, the kind of leading reason why is not necessarily for health benefits as much as it is for the decreasing of the risk of a smell attracting predators. At least that's one of the working kind of philosophies. And then when I looked at other cultures around the world over the test of millennia, I found that actually no culture of humans were actively eating their own placenta. And even in traditional Chinese medicine, some of the oldest TCM texts that might use placenta as an ingredient of a medical or medicinal kind of tincture or some sort of medicine, they were not ever giving the placenta to a woman after childbirth. And the placentas that were used in some of these tinctures or concoctions were the placenta of goats or other animals that had been dried, and they were often given to especially to men actually, as a way of gaining energy and vitality as part of other kind of health goals or ailments. And the practice of eating placenta is something that actually really only got going in a big way in like the 1970s. And so it's a pretty new tradition actually. And some of the data around what is contained in the placenta, just given how toxic so many of our lifestyles are, and the fact that one of the placenta's main functions is to filter out toxins, is the concern and fear that if a woman does consume her own placenta after the fact, she might also be consuming a lot of those toxins that were filtered out to begin with. So that could look like heavy metals or remnants of antibiotics or forever chemicals, plastics, things that we definitely do not want to be eating in our bodies. So knowing all this from the research that I was doing and figuring out some of the other practices that did really involve the placenta and honor the placenta that other communities have done around the world, I was pretty inspired and started learning more about different rituals that could be done so that the placenta wouldn't just go into medical waste, but it also wouldn't go into my body for my second birth. So as I was looking ahead and preparing to give birth a second time, what I decided to do was to take into honor a practice that has been commonly done for a long time across a number of different Native American tribes and traditions, which is to bury the placenta after the fact under a tree or on the land of where the baby calls home. And this is a practice that I found so much beauty and meaning in, because something about the idea of kind of burying the placenta for me, it really felt like the completing of this process, of this cycle where the placenta was created, grown, birthed, and then because it's no longer needed, it did effectively die. And so really honoring that with a bit of like a ceremonial act. And then also that beautiful idea of the baby being tied to the land. So I gave birth in Valencia, Spain, which is not my home of origin, but it is where Lucas was born. And so burying the placenta here in the place where we are right now, where we call home right now, and a place that he can always return to, it just felt so beautiful. The other thing that I did as I was looking into other kind of practices and ways of honoring is I kind of explored the idea of using the placenta and capturing it some way through art. And as luck would have it, my midwife that birthed Lucas, that helped me with that birth experience, she knew how to make prints of the placenta. So after I expelled the placenta, after I gave birth to the placenta, she took it and she put a little bit of paint on it and pressed a like an art paper on top of it. And then I had this print of the placenta, which, and if you haven't seen one of these, it's so beautiful. I highly recommend just to Google it. But a placenta print essentially is like it's like a snapshot of the texture and of the design of the placenta, and it often is likened to, the design looks a lot like the tree of life, which is so fitting, right, if you think about it. And so I have that print, and it felt so beautiful and in a nice way of also kind of honoring and acknowledging what the placenta did for my baby, for myself. So there are tons of practices, and there's a whole number of things out there as well, that you can explore on the internet or in my book, around kind of the honoring of the placenta. Some, I won't go into too much now because this video is getting super long, but there is a lot of options out there. And what I do really encourage or invite you to do is to think about what feels good and nourishing and honoring for you. For some people, the idea of the placenta is like gross and weird and scary and like just get it into medical waste. And for other people, the feeling like this is something that was a part of me, or this is something that connected me and my baby and nourished us and really cared for my baby, and I want to do something about that, that can invite in other practices or rituals, everything ranging from like lotus birth all the way to placenta art. So if this is interesting to you, please reach out. I have more information I can share as well. Either way, I would love it if you could subscribe to my channel just by pressing that button below. And I also have a newsletter. If you're interested, you can subscribe on LizzieLiao.com. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I wish you a beautiful day ahead, and thanks for tuning in as I riff about the placenta.